Mr. Kang, your daughter is shaking in the hospital.
She's asking for you.
I'm on my way. Her condition is worsening. We need to act. What can we do? Tell me.
Stay calm. The doctor is on the way.
Please, help her. Hang in there, buddy. I'm right here.
Yes, doctor, his vitals are dropping.
What did they say? Is he okay?
아빠,
The lab report is conclusive. It's this compound.
How did this happen?
We're investigating. It wasn't an accident.
Lim Sung-che.
I dreamed about Mama.
She didn't get sick because of you.
Tae-mu. Thank you.
At noon, a black nurse called the Korean billionaire. Not his assistant, not his secretary, not the polished PR woman who filtered every piece of information before it reached him. Him. Directly. The phone rang twice before he answered, and in the silence between those rings, Helen Brooks held her breath, looked down at the small girl seizing on the hospital bed, and prayed she had the right number. If this story is already pulling at something inside your chest, like, share this right now, and drop the city or country you're watching from in the comments. Your support is what keeps emotional stories like this one alive. The boardroom on the 42nd floor of KangStar Holdings smelled like expensive leather and quiet power. 14 men in charcoal suits sat around a table that cost more than most people earned in a decade. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Seoul's skyline, gray towers dissolving into gray afternoon sky, a city perpetually in motion, perpetually hungry. Kang Tae-mu stood at the head of the table. He was 31 years old, and he carried himself like someone who had never once been told no and survived. Broad shoulders, sharp jaw, eyes that moved across spreadsheets and human faces with the same cold analytical precision. He wore his success the way other men wore armor, not to show it off, but to make sure nothing got through. The Singapore acquisition closes Friday, he said. His voice was even, unhurried. I want the media blackout maintained until the ink is dry, any leak before then. His phone vibrated. He didn't look at it. Any leak will be treated as a breach of contract and a personal insult. The phone vibrated again. One of his senior directors, a man named Choi with reading glasses perpetually perched on the end of his nose, shifted in his seat. The others kept their eyes on Tae-mu, careful not to react. The phone vibrated a third time. Tae-mu's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He reached into his jacket pocket, glanced at the screen. Unknown number. He rejected the call. As I was saying, the media blackout. The phone rang again. Immediately, same unknown number. The room felt the shift before anyone could name it. Something in the air changed, a barometric pressure drop, the kind that precedes a storm. Tae-mu looked at the phone again. Unknown, again. He stepped back from the table. Excuse me. He answered it in the corridor outside the boardroom, back straight, one hand in his pocket, fully expecting some persistent journalist or misrouted business call. Yes. A pause on the other end. A hospital sound beeping monitors, a distant PA announcement, the specific fluorescent hum of a place that never fully sleeps. Then a woman's voice, calm but with steel underneath it. Mr. Kang, my name is Helen Brooks. I'm a registered nurse at Serenity General Hospital. I'm calling about a patient admitted this morning under the name Kang Ha-eun. Everything in Tae-mu's body went completely still. She's 6 years old, Helen continued, and her voice didn't waver. She had made calls like this before, difficult calls where the words themselves were like scalpels. She was brought in by a private caregiver at approximately 9:45 a.m. She's been experiencing severe neurological episodes since admission. Mr. Kang. A brief, careful pause. Your daughter is shaking in the hospital, and she's been asking for you. The corridor seemed to narrow. Somewhere behind the boardroom doors, Tae-mu could hear his senior directors murmuring, probably speculating about the interruption, calculating what it meant for their positions, their bonuses, their carefully constructed futures. He didn't care. Which hospital? He said, flat, immediate. Serenity General. I'm on the 4th floor, pediatric. I'll be there in 12 minutes. He hung up before she could respond, turned back to the boardroom doors, opened them, walked directly to the head of the table, closed his laptop, and picked up his jacket from the chair back in one fluid motion. Meeting's over, he said. Choi looked up, alarmed. But sir, the Singapore deal will survive 12 hours without me. He was already moving toward the elevator. It won't survive me being in a bad mood. Reschedule. He was in the elevator before anyone could respond. Alone in the descending car, with the city falling away outside the glass wall, Kang Tae-mu did something he never did in front of other people. He closed his eyes. Ha-eun. He made it in 11 minutes. The pediatric ward on the 4th floor of Serenity General was a world apart from the one Tae-mu inhabited. Here, the walls were painted with soft murals, cartoon animals frozen mid-leap across fields of illustrated grass. Someone had taped paper stars to the ceiling of the hallway, yellow and pale blue. A child's drawing of a sun, lopsided and generous, was pinned to the nurse's station bulletin board with a thumbtack. Tae-mu moved through it like a man walking through someone else's dream. His driver had barely stopped the car before he was out of it, his long legs eating up the distance between the parking bay and the hospital entrance. He'd said nothing on the drive over, nothing at all. Just stared at the window and watched the city blur past and felt something in his chest that he had no name for because he had spent a very long time making sure he never had to name things like that. Mr. Kang. He turned. She was standing at the nurse's station, and she was exactly who her voice had suggested, steady, watchful, with the kind of presence that didn't need to announce itself. Helen Brooks was in her late 20s, dark skin luminous under the harsh fluorescent lights, natural hair pinned back neatly. Her scrubs were teal. Her eyes, when they met his, held no deference and no judgment, just clear, direct assessment. Thank you for coming quickly, she said. Where is she? Not a question. Helen didn't flinch at his tone. She'd dealt with scared fathers before, and scared fathers almost always sounded like men giving orders because vulnerability felt too much like freefall. Room 412. I'll take you. She fell into step beside him. I need to brief you first, though. The attending physician is with her now. She had 3 separate neurological episodes between 10 a.m. and 11:30. What we're seeing presents like acute autoimmune encephalitis, though we're still running confirmatory tests. Tae-mu slowed just slightly. Autoimmune encephalitis. Her immune system is attacking her brain. Helen said it plainly because in her experience the truth, said clearly and calmly, was less terrifying than confusion. It's treatable, especially when caught early. She's stable right now and she's conscious. But Mr. Kang, she stopped walking, made him look at her. She's frightened. She's been frightened since she arrived, and she's been saying your name. Something moved across Tae-mu's face, too fast to categorize, too real to ignore. She said Appa, he asked quietly. Repeatedly. He turned and walked to room 412. She looked so small. That was the thought that hit him first, before anything else, before the monitors, before the IV line taped to her tiny hand, before the neurologist standing at the foot of her bed reviewing a tablet. Ha-eun looked so impossibly small in that adult-sized hospital bed, her dark hair spread across the pillow, her eyes half open and fever-glazed. She turned her head when he came in. Appa. Her voice was a whisper, cracked at the edges, but it carried across the room like it had weight. Tae-mu crossed the space between the doorway and her bedside in 3 steps. He sat on the edge of the chair beside her bed, didn't sit back in the chair, didn't settle into it the way a man comfortable in hospitals might. He sat on the edge of it, leaned forward, took her small hand in his large one. I'm here, he said, low, almost rough with something he was working to contain. "I'm here, Ha-eun, Appa's here." She made a small sound. Relief and exhaustion mingled together, and her fingers curled around two of his. Helen Brooks stood in the doorway and watched. She had worked in pediatric care for 4 years. She had seen fathers arrive afraid, and fathers arrive angry, and fathers arrive so deep in denial they couldn't see the child in front of them. She had seen fathers who looked like they belonged in boardrooms and fathers who looked like they'd run from construction sites. She had seen fathers who fell apart in the hallway and fathers who kept it together until they thought no one was looking. Kang Tae-mu kept it together. But Helen could see, in the set of his jaw, in the way his thumb moved almost imperceptibly back and forth across the back of Ha-eun's hand, that it was costing him something. She filed that away. Because she needed to talk to him, not just about the encephalitis. About something else entirely. Dr. Park, the attending neurologist, was a small, precise man with wire-rimmed glasses and the efficient energy of someone who had explained difficult things to frightened people. Thousands of times. He laid it out for Tae-mu in the family consultation room while Ha-eun dozed. Helen had given her a mild sedative to help her rest between tests. "The presentation is consistent with anti-NMDA receptor encephalitis," Dr. Park said, pointing at the scan on the light board. "It's an autoimmune condition in some cases. It can be triggered by an underlying tumor, but in pediatric patients presenting at Ha-eun's age, it's more often idiopathic, meaning we don't always find a clear cause." "Treatment," Tae-mu said. "Immunotherapy. We start immediately. IV steroids first, then IVIG, intravenous immunoglobulin, and if response is insufficient, plasmapheresis. The prognosis for children who receive early aggressive treatment is genuinely good, Mr. Kang. We're talking significant recovery in the majority of cases." Majority. 80 to 90%. Tae-mu said nothing for a moment. He was looking at the brain scan on the light board, the small, luminous cross-sections of his daughter's mind, and his expression was entirely unreadable. "Start the immunotherapy tonight," he said finally. "We already have," Dr. Park said simply. Something in Tae-mu's posture shifted, fractionally, like a building settling. "Good," he said. "What else do you need from me?" "Her complete medical history. We have limited records from her previous physician. There appear to be gaps. Any past neurological incidents, prior diagnoses, family history of autoimmune conditions would all be valuable." Tae-mu was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "I'll have my assistant send whatever we have." He said it smoothly, practiced, the way a man says something when he's controlling what the silence around the words might reveal. Helen, standing against the back wall of the consultation room, noticed. She'd been noticing quite a few things since Kang Tae-mu had walked through the door. Later, when Dr. Park had left and Ha-eun was sleeping soundly under the soft hum of monitors, Helen found Tae-mu standing at the window at the end of the hall. His jacket was draped over his arm. His shirt was slightly rumpled, the first sign of disorder she'd seen in him. He was staring out at the city with his hands in his pockets, and he looked, for the first time since he'd arrived, like someone who didn't know what to do next. "She'll sleep for a few hours," Helen said, stopping beside him but giving him space. "The sedative will keep her comfortable." "Thank you," a pause, "for calling me directly. She wanted you there. It seemed like the most important thing." He turned to look at her, really look at her, the way he'd been looking at board presentations and balance sheets all afternoon, with that cold, analytical attention. Except there was something different in it now, something less certain. "How did you get my personal number?" he asked, not accusatory, genuinely curious. It was in her file, listed as primary emergency contact. "My assistant usually," he stopped. "Usually filters calls before they reach you," Helen finished quietly. She didn't make it a judgment, just a fact. "I bypassed the filtering. I hope that was all right." "It was necessary," he said. Then, after a moment, "more than necessary." They stood in silence for a beat, the city traffic faint behind the glass. "The medical history," Helen said carefully. Dr. Park mentioned gaps in her records. Yes. Is there anything you can tell me directly about her mother's health history, her early childhood? Her mother isn't in the picture. His tone closed around the subject like a door swinging shut. Then he seemed to hear how it sounded. He exhaled. She hasn't been for over a year. I have full custody. Helen nodded slowly. I see. Is there something specific you're asking? She hesitated. Not from fear. Helen Brooks had never been particularly prone to fear. From precision. She was choosing her words the way a surgeon chose instruments. There's something in Ha-eun's blood work that I flagged to Dr. Park, she said. Something outside the autoimmune picture, a trace compound that presents as, she paused. I don't want to alarm you before we have full results. Tae-mu turned to face her fully now. Tell me. Tomorrow morning, when we have more data. Her eyes held his steadily. I'm not withholding it to protect you, Mr. Kang. I'm withholding it because I want to be certain before I say it. A long beat of silence. You have good instincts, he said finally, as if he were assessing her, rating her. I have a very sick little girl who trusts me to look after her, Helen replied. That tends to sharpen instincts considerably. Something shifted in Tae-mu's expression, not softening exactly, more like recognition. I'm going to stay tonight, he said. There's a family lounge at the end of the hall. I'll have someone bring you coffee. He almost smiled. Almost. It didn't quite make it to his face, but it was there in the quality of his silence. Thank you, Nurse Brooks. Helen, she said, and walked back toward room 412. If this story is moving you, if you're feeling something in your chest right now, like and share this. Drop a comment telling me what you think is going to happen next. I want to know where you're watching from. Morning came to the hospital the way morning always does in hospitals. Not with sunlight and birds, but with a shift change, the squeak of wheels on linoleum, and the institutional smell of coffee brewed too strong and too early. Tae-mu had not slept. He sat in the family lounge with his phone face down on the table beside him, jacket folded over the chair back, top button of his shirt undone for the first time in recent memory. He had a cold cup of coffee in front of him and the expression of a man who has spent the night having conversations with himself that he lost. He'd called his assistant at 5 a.m., sent 3 messages to KangStar's legal team, reviewed Ha-eun's medical file, the official one, the thinly populated one, twice. And he'd thought, for the first time in a long time, about Min-jae. Ha-eun's mother. He'd thought about the day she'd left, how she hadn't left a note, how she'd taken almost nothing with her except a small photograph from the hallway table, a photograph of herself and Ha-eun at the beach, Ha-eun barely 3 years old, squinting into the sun. She'd taken the photograph. She'd left the child. He'd told himself he understood. That people who were drowning sometimes abandoned ships not out of cruelty, but out of desperation. He'd told himself this carefully and methodically, and he'd built a life around that belief because the alternative, that she'd left for a reason he didn't know, was a door he'd never been willing to open. He was considering opening it now. Helen found him there at 7:15, holding a fresh file folder. She sat down across from him without asking permission, set the folder on the table, placed her hands flat on top of it. Ha-eun is awake, she said first. She ate half a bowl of rice porridge and asked if you were still here. Tae-mu exhaled. Good, I'll see her in a moment. He looked at the folder. That's the blood work. Yes. Tell me. Helen opened the folder, laid 2 sheets on the table between them.
The
Her
lab
voice
report
was
is
calm
conclusive.
and
It's
measured
this
and
compound.
completely serious.
How did this happen?
We're
The trace
investigating. It wasn't
compound
an
I
accident.
flagged yesterday. Our toxicology team confirmed this morning. It's a synthetic immunosuppressant, not the kind we'd ever prescribe to a child. It's used in a very specific context. She paused. It's used to mask autoimmune conditions, to keep them latent, to prevent the immune response from triggering until... She stopped. Tae-mu's eyes were fixed on the report. Until it's triggered in a controlled way, he finished. His voice was very quiet. Someone has been giving Ha-eun a substance that was suppressing her immune response for an extended period. When the suppression was removed, the encephalitis emerged. He leaned back in his chair. His jaw was tight. His eyes were dangerous in a way that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with the particular cold focus of someone deciding what to do with information that has just changed every calculation. How long? Based on the compound levels, we estimate she's been receiving it for 4 to 8 months. Who had access to her? That's a question for you, Mr. Kang, and possibly for the police. He stood up abruptly, walked 2 paces, turned back. Her caregiver. That's where I'd start. Her caregiver was recommended to me by... He stopped, put his hand briefly over his mouth. The gesture was involuntary, reflexive, the physical manifestation of a realization landing hard. He lowered his hand. She was recommended to me by my board's operations director. Helen said nothing. 6 months ago, he proposed a hostile restructuring. I rejected it. He's been... Tae-mu's voice was almost meditative now, moving through the logic of it. He's been trying to force a governance crisis, to push me out, if Ha-eun's health deteriorated publicly. A billionaire grieving his sick child, Helen said carefully, would be a billionaire not watching his board. His eyes met hers. You're very perceptive, he said. I'm from a family where people couldn't afford not to be perceptive, she replied evenly. I learned early what it looks like when powerful people make decisions that hurt the people with no power. Something passed between them then. Not warmth, exactly, or not just warmth. It was the particular connection that forms between people who are looking at the same truth from different angles and recognizing the same shape. I need to make some calls, he said. Your daughter needs you in room 412 first, she said. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, put the folder under his arm, and walked back down the hall toward the mural of the animals and the paper stars and the lopsided sun. Ha-eun was sitting up in bed when he came in. She was pale, and her eyes still had the slightly unfocused quality of the medication, but she was awake, alert. Her hair was sticking out on one side in a way that would have scandalized her under normal circumstances. She was a precise child, careful about her appearance, careful about her words. It was, people sometimes said, a very adult quality in a 6-year-old. Tae-mu didn't find it adult. He found it heartbreaking, in the particular way that only he knew, because he knew why she was careful. Children who grew up in uncertain homes learned to be careful. They learned to take up the right amount of space and no more. He sat beside her bed. How do you feel? He asked. My head is fuzzy, she said, then with a kind of grave practicality, like it's full of cotton. That's the medicine. It'll get better. She considered this. Then, Appa, were you here all night? Yes. Did you sleep? No. She frowned at him with the solemn disapproval only a child can project at a parent. You need to sleep. I know. You always say that to me. Ha-eun, you need to sleep. But you don't do it yourself. I know, he said again, and this time there was something in his voice that wasn't there before, something raw and unguarded and real. I know. She reached out and put her small hand over his. I'm okay, Appa, she said. I don't want you to be scared. He looked at her, this precise, careful, impossibly small person who was more his than anything else he'd ever built or earned or fought for. And for a moment, in the quiet of room 412, with the monitors beeping and the city alive beyond the window, Kang Tae-mu felt something breach the surface. Not collapse, not breakdown, just truth. I am scared, he said softly. But that's all right. Being scared means you matter to me. Ha-eun seemed to consider this with great seriousness. Okay, she said finally. You can be a little scared, but not too much. A reasonable amount. Yes, she settled back against her pillow. Helen said I'm getting better already. Did she? She told me this morning. She said the medicine is working. A pause. I like her. She talks to me like I'm a real person. You are a real person. I know, but some people talk to sick children like they're made of glass. Ha-eun looked up at the ceiling. Helen doesn't do that. Tae-mu looked toward the doorway. Helen was visible through the window, moving through the corridor with a chart in her hands, efficient and unhurried. "No," he said, "she doesn't." The calls he made from the family lounge over the next 2 hours were quiet, precise, and devastatingly effective. By 10 a.m., KangStar Holdings' legal team had been briefed. By 10:30, Ha-eun's former caregiver had been contacted by investigators. By 11, the compound and the blood work had been matched to a pharmaceutical supplier with a documented purchase trail. Board director Lim Sung-chul had covered his tracks carefully. Not carefully enough. On the third night of Ha-eun's hospitalization, she woke briefly at 2 in the morning. The ward was quiet except for its mechanical breathing, the monitors, the distant soft hiss of the ventilation system, the occasional footsteps of night staff. Tae-mu had fallen asleep in the chair beside her bed, genuinely asleep. Finally, chin dropped toward his chest. Ha-eun looked at him in the dark for a long moment. Then she said very quietly, "Appa." He was awake immediately. That immediate parental wakefulness, the switch that flips the moment a child makes a sound. "I'm here," he said, reaching for her hand. "I'm here, are you hurting?" "No," she was quiet for a moment. "I was dreaming about Mama." The air in the room changed. Tae-mu was very still. "Was it a good dream?" he asked carefully. "She was at the beach, the same beach in the photograph." Ha-eun's voice was drowsy, blurred with sleep and medication and something older than either. "She was looking at the water and she looked sad." Tae-mu said nothing. "Appa," a pause, "is Mama okay?" The question landed in the center of him like a stone dropped into still water. He felt the ripples move out in every direction. Is she okay? He didn't know. He had told himself he didn't need to know. That Minjai had made her choice, and he had made his, and the life they'd built separately, him with Ha-eun, her with whatever she'd gone toward, was simply the way things were. But lying in hospital chairs in the middle of the night, with your daughter's hand in yours, has a way of dissolving the careful architecture of things you've decided not to feel. "I don't know," he said, and for the first time he said it without resentment, without the cold dismissal he usually wrapped around the subject. Just, honestly, "I don't know where she is, Ha-eun, I'm sorry." Ha-eun looked at him with those dark eyes that were, in certain lights, almost uncomfortably perceptive. "Maybe she's somewhere safe," she said. "Maybe she's coming back." "Maybe," he said. "Would that be okay, if she came back?" Tae-mu looked at his daughter for a long time in the half-dark of the hospital room. "I'd want her to be safe," he said finally, "whatever that means." Ha-eun seemed satisfied by this. She closed her eyes. "Me too," she murmured, and drifted back to sleep. Tae-mu sat with her hand in his and stared at the wall for a very long time. In the morning, he found Helen in the nurse's break room, pouring coffee with the practiced efficiency of someone running on a shift and a half. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said from the doorway. She looked up. "You can ask." "Why do you work nights on top of your regular shift? I've been watching the rotation. You don't have to. The staffing here isn't critical." Helen was quiet for a moment. She poured a second cup, set it on the counter in his direction. "My younger sister was sick when we were children," she said. "She was in a hospital like this one for almost 2 years, and she told me once that the worst part wasn't the pain." She wrapped both hands around her cup. "It was the nights, when visiting hours were over and the lights dimmed and everyone went home and the hospital became just this place where sick things happened." She looked at Tae-mu. "I decided a long time ago that when I had the ability to be the person who stayed, I'd stay." He picked up the cup she'd set out, held it. "Your sister," he said carefully, "is she?" "She's 31, she's a teacher." A small, real smile. "She's absolutely fine." "Good." He looked down at the coffee. "Helen," he said her name like he was testing the weight of it. "There's something I need to tell you about the blood work, about what we found." He looked up. "About how this may have happened." She sat down. He sat across from her. And for the first time, Kang Tae-mu told someone else the whole thing. All of it, Lim Sung-chul, the restructuring, the caregiver, the pharmaceutical trail. The 6 months of slow, deliberate poisoning wrapped in a caregiving relationship, targeting a 6-year-old child because her father stood between a man and 300 billion won. When he finished, the break room was very quiet. Helen's expression had gone through several things during the telling: composure, controlled anger, the quiet grief of someone who has worked too long in a place where children get hurt. It had settled into something focused and precise. "You should know," she said at last, "that I'll be filing an independent nursing report, outside of the hospital chain. What was done to Ha-eun?" She shook her head. "This goes beyond your corporate affairs, Mr. Kang. This is a crime against a child, and I intend to make sure it's documented as such." "I expected nothing less," he said. "And I want to make sure you understand." She held his gaze. "Ha-eun didn't get sick because of anything you failed to do. She got sick because someone decided to use her. That's not a failure of your parenthood. It's a crime against it." Tae-mu's jaw tightened. His eyes were bright in a way that might have been exhaustion and might have been something else. "I should have known," he said. "I should have." "No," Helen said firmly, not unkindly, but firmly. "That is what they count on. They count on the parent blaming themselves while they make their moves. Don't give him that too." A long beat of silence. "You're very good at this," he said. "Protecting the people in these beds is literally my job, Mr. Kang." "Tae-mu," he said quietly. She looked at him. "You've been calling me Mr. Kang for 4 days," he said. "I think we've moved past it." A small beat, then Helen nodded. "Tae-mu," she said, and returned to her coffee. "If you've made it this far and you're feeling something like this story, share it and leave a comment. Where are you watching from? Should there be a part 2? Tell me." Ha-eun was discharged on the 7th day. She walked out of Serenity General Hospital in her own clothes. A small yellow coat, dark leggings, her hair in 2 careful braids that Tae-mu had attempted, and Helen had quietly, diplomatically fixed, holding her father's hand and clutching a paper drawing she'd made in the activity room. A crayon house with a yellow sun and 2 figures standing in front of it, one tall and one small. She had drawn a 3rd figure. Slightly to the side, smaller than the tall one, larger than the small one, with dark curly crayon hair. She had given the drawing to Helen before they left. Helen had looked at it for a long moment, face soft with something she didn't have words for in that moment. "That's you," Ha-eun said solemnly. "You have to be in the house too, because you helped make it safe." 2 weeks after Ha-eun's discharge, Lim Sung-chul resigned from KangStar Holdings board. The official statement cited personal health reasons. The unofficial version, which circulated in the particular way that true things circulate through closed circles, was considerably more specific. Criminal investigators had opened a file. The pharmaceutical trail had been handed to prosecutors. Tae-mu said nothing publicly. He didn't need to. But it was what happened 6 weeks after discharge that mattered more. Tae-mu was in his home office, not the KangStar boardroom, the actual office in his apartment, the one with Ha-eun's drawings pinned around the edges of his monitor, and a second desk chair that she sometimes commandeered to do her homework, when his personal phone rang. Unfamiliar number. He answered immediately this time. Silence, then breathing, then. "Tae-mu." A voice he knew, one he had not allowed himself to think about in over a year, one that arrived in his chest like a key turning in a lock he'd thought was welded shut. "Minjai," he said. A long pause. "Is she okay?" Minjai's voice was breaking at the edges. I'm so sorry. I heard she was in the hospital and I had to know she was." "She's home," he said. "She's safe." A sound on the other end, something between relief and grief. "Minjai," his voice was careful, deliberate. "Where are you?" Silence. "I had to leave," she said at last. They told me if I didn't, they told me Ha-eun would be safer if She stopped. "I know how that sounds, I know what I did. But there are things I need to tell you, things I should have told you before Are you safe?" he said. Yes, I think so." "Then come home." His voice was steady, Not warm, not cold, something more complicated than either. Come home and tell me everything, and we'll figure out the rest from there. Another long silence. She'll want to see me, Minjai asked quietly. Tae-mu looked at the crayon drawing pin to his monitor. The house, the sun, the two figures, one tall, one small. She dreams about you, he said. She said she hopes you're somewhere safe. A pause. She got that from somewhere. 3 weeks after that call, Helen Brooks was finishing the last hour of a night shift when she saw them in the corridor outside the pediatric ward. A man and a woman and a small girl. Tae-mu and a woman she didn't recognize, slight, dark-haired, with eyes that had clearly been crying not too long ago, and hands that kept touching Ha-eun's shoulders like she was checking to make sure she was real. And Ha-eun between them, holding both their hands, looking up at each of her parents in turn with the particular satisfaction of a child whose world has been, somehow, partially mended. Helen stood at the nurse's station and watched them walk toward the exit. Tae-mu turned at the door, looked back down the corridor. When he saw her, he stopped, said something to Minjai, who looked in Helen's direction, and then, to Helen's slight surprise, bowed her head. A deep, genuine bow. The bow of someone who knows what someone else's steadiness cost during a crisis and wants to honor it. Helen nodded back. Tae-mu held her gaze for a moment. Then, finally, completely, he smiled. Not the almost smile from the hospital corridor in the early days. A real one. The kind a person produces when they've been holding something too tight for too long and have finally, cautiously, let a little of it go. He mouthed something across the distance. Thank you. Helen mouthed back. Do better. And she meant it in every possible way. Do better at watching your child. Do better at being present. Do better at not letting other people's greed go unchallenged. Do better at letting people in. And from the way his smile shifted just slightly, she suspected he understood all of it. The automatic doors slid open. The Kang family walked out into the morning. If this story moved you, if you're sitting somewhere in the world right now feeling something real, please share, and drop your city or country in the comments. And tell me, should there be a part 2? Because there is so much more of this story still untold. Your comments are what makes these stories keep coming. Family is not defined by flawless presence. It is rebuilt through honest reckoning. A parent's greatest protection is not wealth or power, but attention. To the small signs, the quiet fears, the voices of those who care for our children when we cannot. Emotional communication, even when difficult, is always worth the cost. Love is a practice, not a posture.